Welcome to the 2022 Candidates Debate, moderated by the nonpartisan League of Women Voters of New Canaan. Candidates, thank you for being here tonight. We are grateful to Town Hall for allowing us to use this space and to NCTV Channel 79 for its production of the debate. Voters, we know your time is precious, so this year we're hosting 5 separate debates so that you can watch only the races that are applicable to you. A reminder that edited or partial usage of tonight's program is not permitted. For the first time at one of our debates, we are excited to welcome a select group of seniors from the New Canaan High School debate team. These seniors got to meet our candidates tonight and will be presenting the debate questions throughout the evening. It is heartwarming to know that when asked, these students enthusiastically raised their hands and were excited about participating in our democracy. Our hope is that by having these students here, more citizens, both young, old, and in between, will tune in, get informed, and vote. Questions for tonight's debate were submitted to the League from the public in advance. I want to thank everyone who took the time to let us know the issues they cared about most this election. In accordance with our nonpartisan guidelines, our carefully selected team reviews the questions and often rewrites them for comprehensiveness, fairness, nonpartisanship, applicability to all candidates, and relevance to the office. The candidates have all agreed to a set of debate rules for the evening. While our students will present the questions, I will remain here and be responsible for enforcing the rules, including the time limitations. But I'm sure it won't come to that. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Alex Arnold from New Canaan High School debate team, who will ask the questions for this debate.
Welcome to the candidate debate for Senate District 36, serving voters in parts of Greenwich, New Canaan, and Stamford. Our candidates are Ryan Fazio and Trevor Crow. The debate will begin with opening statements followed by questions submitted by the public. Candidates will be allowed a 1.5-minute response, followed by an optional 30-second rebuttal. We will end with closing statements. Based on a random draw, we will begin with opening remarks from Ryan Fazio.
Good evening. Thank you, Alex, for moderating. Thank you, Trevor, for being here. And thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting us. My name is Ryan Fazio. I'm very proud to represent Greenwich, Stamford, and New Canaan in the state Senate. As soon as I got elected, I went to work across the aisle in order to solve the challenges facing our district. I wrote and passed legislation to improve student mental health with long-term interventions in schools in legislation that was called by one social psychologist a first in the nation program. I worked collaboratively with my Democratic colleague on the Aging Committee in order to protect the interests of seniors. And I was the only state senator to submit legislation in order to change 830G and protect local control of zoning. In the next 2 years, we must deliver positive change to our district to improve our economy, protect local control, and the public safety for New Canaan, the 36th district, and all of Connecticut. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan Fazio. And now opening remarks from Trevor Crow.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. A little bit about me and my background. I've been in Fairfield County for 20 years. I've raised my children here. I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, where I was a competitive figure skater. By the time I was 18, I wasn't landing triples, so I had to go to college. I graduated from Wellesley College and went to Wall Street, and I was in sales and trading for 5 years. After that, I went to Harvard and got an MBA. Once my kids got to school, I knew I couldn't make that commute, so I got another master's in marriage and family therapy. So for the past 16 years, I've been a practicing small business owner therapist, and I've been helping families solve problems. It's been my honor. So I would like to take these capabilities from the grit, the perseverance, to the understanding and enjoyment of business from Harvard Business School and helping people find common ground to Hartford, because doesn't Hartford need a therapist?
Thank you, Trevor Crow. 30 years after Statute 830G on affordable housing was enacted, less than a quarter of Connecticut towns meet the target of having 10% of housing stock deemed affordable. What do you think are reasonable affordable housing goals for Connecticut, and how would you achieve them? Ryan Fazio.
Recently, since I've been in office, I met a young family in New Canaan who lives on Weed Street, who recently moved to this town for all it has to offer, made an investment in a single-family home in a single-family home neighborhood because that's where they want to have their family and build their future. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, an 105-unit development comes to Weed and Elm Street, totally out of the blue, going around all of the zoning and regulations that our town has to offer in order to protect the interests of the town because of state law and because of state leadership that wants to override local control and undermine the interests of this community and other communities around the state. I was the only state senator in this term to introduce legislation to change 830G to protect local control of our housing and zoning. That bill that I introduced was not advanced by the state legislature because the Democratic leadership refuses to change 830G and actually wants to advance legislation that will further undermine our local control, including a bill that will effectively double the 830G housing mandate. The moratorium process through which New Canaan, even though it does a good job at advancing affordable housing, was recently denied, is too convoluted. There's only one or two law firms in the entire state which actually deal with moratoriums. This law has failed our town. It's failed our state. We need to start anew. I have already started down the path of providing the leadership in order to provide that change.
Thank you.
I am not a big proponent of 830G at all. I know we do need to make change. Towns have all been asked to do something called 830J, which is their vision of what is reasonable and possible for their towns. Greenwich, I believe, is, I think most towns are late. I'm not sure if New Canaan has got their 830J in, but we do. I haven't knocked on a single door where someone said to me, no, I don't want a policeman here. I don't want the teacher to live down the street. Nobody says that ever. Everybody wants these people in our communities, including me. I would like to see my children be able to move back to my community. They could not afford it right now. I have single mom friends who cannot afford to live in their kids' school district because it's costing so much money to rent right now. So there has to be a way that we find a possible way forward where we build reasonable housing for all the jobs. We have 110,000 unfilled jobs in the state. We have a housing crisis right at our doorstep. We need about 25,000 units built in Fairfield County. And because we're bringing so many jobs in, ASML is bringing in 2,000 jobs in chip making, we need places to put these people. So again, I'm going back to what towns can do, how we can collaboratively put ideas together between public-private partnerships and our housing communities. Thank you.
Trevor Crow. Now, rebuttal from Ryan Fazio.
Yes, first and foremost, we need leaders in Hartford who will actually put pen to paper and propose specific legislation in order to change 830G. We also need to change the makeup of the state legislature in order to advance reforms to 830G and protect local control of zoning. New Canaan, for the first time in the last 4 years, has had 2 Democratic state legislators, part of the majority. They had their opportunity to reform 830G and work with the leadership in order to accomplish that. As long as we have 65% one-party rule in this state, we're not going to change 830G.
Trevor Crow, your rebuttal.
Yes, I believe that we can change 830G, and I would have a seat at that table to propose ways to actually, right now, the whole 830G thing has come off the table because of interest rates are going up, and it's costing in the supply chain too much to build these buildings. What I want to see is us work with builders to build units that make sense for our communities, and that's the most important thing of all of this. We need to solve that problem.
Thank you, Trevor Crow. All states need revenue to provide services. What would you change about the ways Connecticut generates its revenue or how it spends it? Trevor Crow.
Yes, we have to tax our people to be able to pay for services, for roads, for bridges, et cetera. I believe we could work on getting our taxes down. What I like about the Lamont administration is they have done a very good job with fiscal responsibility and paying down unfunded liabilities. Because of that, we are paying less, $440 million less in interest rates, and we also have a higher bond rating right now, which is lowering our borrowing costs. That's actually a tax break. The other thing the Lamont administration has done, including the legislature, is a historic tax cut of $640 million. And that has helped families with child tax credit, free buses, gas tax holiday, and seniors get tax-free pension and annuities. So I know that we need to tax to pay for our services, but I also want to do it in a way that's reasonable and that we find efficiencies in our government and that we figure out a way so people don't feel overly taxed. What I do hear at the doors are young families. When I get to the doors, I get the shh, the baby's sleeping. And then the next thing I ask is, why are you moving to Connecticut? Because it's cheaper here than New Jersey and New York. And our quality of life, our great education system, and families feeling safe here. So we're actually a tax deal. I do still believe we can work on it, even with estate and gift taxes. We could hopefully bring those down as well.
Thank you. Ryan Fazio?
Connecticut families are taxed too much already. According to the Tax Foundation Wallet Hub, Connecticut has the second highest tax burden of any state in the country, second only behind New York. That's unacceptable. It's no surprise to me that we've had the fourth lowest population growth in the country over the last 10 years and the fourth lowest rate of economic growth over the last 4 years under that regime, under that paradigm. Hartford takes too much from our families as is. We need to reform our tax system, simplify it, broaden the tax base in order to reduce income tax rates and retirement income taxes across the board in order to incentivize long-term economic growth, give you back thousands of dollars more that you work hard to earn so you can raise your family here, so that you can build a life here, and so that you can afford to retire here. When I talk to families, when I talk to retirees, without fail, they tell me that it's too expensive to retire here, that they're thinking about leaving the state. That's not right. We need to make it affordable to age in place here. We need to reduce the tax burden in order to ensure that there is investment and job creation and turn around those moving vans. I love this community. I think it's the best place imaginable to raise a family and to build a life. But as long as we have the second highest tax burden in the country as we do now, as long as our state legislature continues to raise taxes as they have several times over the last 10 years, that won't be guaranteed to last. We need a positive change and we need economic leadership.
Trevor Crow, your rebuttal?
Yeah, that's dead wrong. We were number 2 in the country last year in one-way moves to Connecticut. We were behind just New Mexico. So no, families are coming here, and we have to keep the support and the building our jobs. But mostly, Ryan, why did you vote against a tax cut? You voted against seniors getting pension annuity tax cut. I don't understand it. I do hear that you wanted to tax cut at a bigger rate, which means now.
Thank you, Trevor Crow. Ryan Fazio, your rebuttal.
The last sentence at least was correct, that I introduced legislation in order to deliver a $1.2 billion tax cut because the windfall of cash to the state budget coffers from inflation and federal dollars is yours, is the taxpayers, and needs to be returned directly to taxpayers. I voted against the budget because it was all gimmicks. There was no permanent serious tax relief, and there was an 11% year-over-year increase in spending, which means higher taxes down the line for the taxpayers of the 36th district.
Thank you.
That's unacceptable.
Connecticut is one of the few states that does not allow no-excuse early voting, and our legislature cannot consider early voting measures without a change to our Constitution. The November 8th ballot will ask voters if they approve such a change to our state constitution. Many voters want to know if they vote yes, what early voting measures a candidate will support. What is your position on early voting, and if elected, what specific early voting measures would you support? Ryan Fazio?
Thank you, Alex. I think voting should be easy, secure, and fair. I voted in favor of a law this year crossing party lines in order to make it easier to vote by absentee ballot. I was criticized by some of my friends to the right in order for doing so, but I think it was the right thing to do. We effectively already have early voting in this state. Even now, you could go to the town clerk's office during business hours tomorrow and vote early in-person absentee ballot. That is reasonable, I think, a reasonable accommodation for people who cannot go to the ballot box on election day. But this open-ended system where you can have months-long election days called early voting, I do not think is reasonable or fair. And there are several studies, including at the University of Wisconsin, the University of Arkansas, and recently from Yale University, that say that early voting regimes do not increase voter turnout because they devalue the view or the value of election day in the eyes of voters. It also means that millions of voters across the country vote with very different information than others. We should make it easy to vote, encourage voting on election day, have absentee ballot laws that are highly accommodative and that ensure security. But this open-ended, kind of chaotic system, I don't think is reasonable. We need a balance.
Thank you. Trevor Crow?
I am absolutely a supporter of early voting. We need at least 2 to 3 weeks. If you have kids, you understand that a lot of times you cannot make it on that one day because you're busy or somebody gets sick, or in my case, one kid had broke their arm once. So things happen. So I do believe we need more time to do this. Yes, Ryan is correct. We do get to do absentee ballots. It has been increased through COVID. We've proven we can make this happen in a good, reasonable way. But I do believe to support our democracy, we need to give people enough time to get to the polls. And again, when you have a family and life is very complicated, it's really tough to get there on just one day. And boy, oh boy, I've had those really tough days.
Thank you. Ryan Fazio, your rebuttal?
Yeah, and again, I think it should be easy to vote absentee. There should be more excuses to vote absentee because life is difficult, and the 14 hours to vote on election day, obviously it's a lot, but having the month of absentee voting, including in-person absentee voting, which is effectively early voting, is a reasonable accommodation. But all of the evidence says that early voting, the open-ended early voting regimes in other states does not increase voter turnout. So what it means is that party machines are changing the makeup of electorates, not increasing voter turnout.
Trevor Crow, your rebuttal?
I'm just very simple. I believe in early voting, and it should be with minimally 2 to 3 weeks. I would be even happy with mail-in voting. There are a couple states like Washington State that do it. I believe our democracy is based on people being engaged, and the easier you make that engagement, the better off we all are. So I've got 100% behind early voting.
Thank you. Connecticut recently enacted legislation to protect the right of persons both receiving and providing reproductive health care services and to codify access to more reproductive health care service providers. Do you support Connecticut's current position and why? Or what changes, if any, would you recommend? Trevor Crow.
I support this bill 100% with my entire body. I can't tell you how strongly I feel about this. We have set ourselves up as a safe haven state. It gives women a chance to have proper health care. This is a health care issue. It's also how we are as people. We become second-class citizens if we do not have bodily autonomy. I am appalled that Dobbs happened, and we've now seen a completely new world out there. And there are young people, it's this terrible story. It's a 10-year-old who had to leave her state because she was raped, only 10 years old. She had to go to a different state to obtain the proper health care. And had we not been, by the way, we're nationally in front of this issue. That girl, if she had come here, she could have been extradited, and her health care provider could have been extradited and prosecuted. So this is an incredibly important piece of law that I'm thrilled that we have here. And it also, remember this, makes us competitive. There's companies out there that are coming to our state because they know their employees can get proper health care. So this puts us out front. I am incredibly proud of this. And we also need more abortion providers. You'll hear more about that in a second.
Thank you. Ryan Fazio?
I support legal abortion in the state of Connecticut. Leadership of the Republican caucus in the state Senate, in the state House, and the Republican gubernatorial candidate agree with that position as well. We also need to maintain high health and safety standards for the procedure in the state. That's why I joined 17 Democrats in voting against HB 5414, which is the subject of the question, because according to at least 6 independent medical organizations, it could have, quote, a disastrous effect on patient safety. They urged the legislature to please oppose this well-intentioned but flawed legislation. I also introduced legislation at the beginning of the term in order to improve access to contraception, in order to reduce unplanned pregnancy. But it should remain clear to everyone that both me and my opponent support keeping abortion legal in the state of Connecticut. Of course, my opponent has unfortunately been lying about my position in public, but my position should be very clear, and the position of both Republican leadership and Democratic leadership in the state of Connecticut should be very clear that abortion should remain legal in the state of Connecticut.
Thank you. Trevor Crow, your rebuttal.
Okay, first of all, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology has called for it's actually on their front page referendum of teaching more people to our nurse APRNs, midwives, to perform abortions. We need to increase access. More states that don't do it, there's another generation of providers who cannot perform abortions, which is going to be a big problem going forward. Yeah, if there's a constitutional amendment, Ryan, would you actually vote for it? For Roe?
Thank you. Ryan Fazio?
Again, in policy, I support legal abortion in the state of Connecticut, irrespective of how that's codified. But again, the organization that my opponent's quoting is not actually discussing the bill in question. 6 medical organizations said that the bill in question that my opponent supports would reduce the standard of care for women and reduce patient safety in the state of Connecticut. That's why Republicans and Democrats voted against it. But again, my opponent continues to be dishonest about my position. I support legal abortion in Connecticut.
Connecticut residents have faced increased energy costs and service disruptions. What legislation would you propose to improve our energy and resource infrastructure to ensure future access and affordability? Ryan Fazio.
Under 12 years of one-party state government, Connecticut has become unaffordable, and our energy costs, our electricity costs, are the highest in the continental U.S. That's unacceptable. In part, it's because we have a horrible utility company in the state. It's also because we have horrible leadership and state policy. We could do far better to make our energy portfolio affordable, reliable, and clean. I introduced legislation with colleagues this year in order to do just that. One is to give more independence and power to the Consumer Protection Agency of the state government, PURA, which is currently subordinate to other, more political bureaucracies. 2 is to simplify the renewable portfolio standards so all forms of clean energy compete on an equal playing field against one another in order to find the most affordable source. And 3 is to examine the 20% of our energy bill that is due to state mandates and taxes, reevaluate and roll back those programs that increase your electricity bill by 20%. As long as we have the highest electricity costs in the continental U.S., we have no chance of building manufacturing jobs, of supporting small business, of keeping retirees here, and making our state prosperous and affordable for all people. So we need a change in our policy. I spent half of my career in the renewable energy sector and believe I'm prepared to balance the considerations of the environment and the considerations of the economy for our residents.
Thank you. Trevor Crow?
Well, due to deregulation, which was a Republican deal back in the 90s, we did end up with a monopoly that is doing not a particularly good job, and we need better regulation on them. And they're making double-digit profits, and PURA should be on top of them. Now, we're making progress, but what we really need to be doing is pivoting towards renewables. That's the solution. We should not be relying on natural gas, which we've been doing more so since the 2000s when we went from oil and coal burning to more natural gas. At the time, it was a good idea, it was cheap, and we were in the fracking boom. Right now, we are now exporting a lot of our natural gas to Europe because of the Ukraine-Russian war. So what we need to do, and hopefully quickly as possible, is invest in renewables. We need to invest in the grid, and this should be part of our regulation over Eversource, which is they need to be showing us what they're doing with the grid, along with metering. We need better metering, and we have a lot of houses, et cetera, that are analog. Once we're in a digital place, we can handle the grid better. So there are things that we can be doing. One thing is potentially more nuclear energy, smaller plants. It's a little scary, but it is much cheaper, and well, I don't know how safe it is, but we have other areas that we can be building, and I'd like to see more wind and solar. And my opponent voted against EV charging stations and the Clean Air Act. And if we go to renewables, we also help the environment.
Thank you. Ryan Fazio, your rebuttal.
I think this style of politics where you criticize someone on the basis of the name of a bill they vote for and against is not sufficiently serious for the state of Connecticut. I think a lot of people in this state would be surprised to hear that we're making progress when we have the highest electricity bills in the continental U.S. and they continue to go up and up and up and make life unaffordable for everyday people who are currently trying to look at heating their homes in the winter. We need real solutions. We need specifics. The types of energy projects like the unaffordable New London project is not acceptable.
Thank you. Trevor Crow, your rebuttal.
I still believe we can, our affordability, you voted against child tax credit and free buses, et cetera. So there are ways that there have been solutions. You chose not to vote for it. So.
Thank you. We invite our candidates to present their closing statements, starting with Ryan Fazio.
Thank you to the League. Thank you, Alex. Representing New Canaan and Greenwich and Stamford is the honor of a lifetime. This, for the life of me, I think is the best community imaginable to build a life. But our community and our state faces immense challenges. If the state leadership is able to sweep the state legislative elections here in New Canaan and reassert a supermajority, then there will be much more at risk here in New Canaan across a 36th district. A statewide property tax is supported by the President of the Senate. Doubling 830G requirements is supported by the state leadership. And taking away our school resource officers is supported by the state leadership. We need a positive change in direction that will only be begotten by a balance in the state legislature. We need to reduce taxes and the cost of living, protect local control of our housing and change 830G, and protect the public safety and support our law enforcement for all people. We can do better, and that's why I ask for your vote on November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you. Trevor Crow, your rebuttal.
Thank you again for having
closing statement.
Oh, closing.
My apologies.
Got it. Okay. In closing, thank you so much for having me here. My priorities are, number one, economic growth, and unlike what Ryan is saying, we are really doing incredibly well. Lamont is bringing in fintech, biotech, and aerospace business and jobs. He has also put our fiscal house in order and the legislature. I want to continue working on that. I do not want to see any more cans kicked down the road. We've done this long enough. And just like that larger tax credit that Ryan's talking about, that's exactly what that does. And we've seen that from the Republicans. I don't want to see any more of that. Women's reproductive rights, absolutely. I am just a huge champion. I would not like to see anything taken away from this. And the Republicans over the past 15 years have tried to chip away at Roe 30 times with different legislation. So you cannot believe those words. It's codified law. And gun safety. What's more important, your Second Amendment or second graders? I will protect children. I will go after every gun safety measure possible. And I never want to see another Sandy Hook.
This concludes our Senate 36 debate. We thank our candidates and our viewers for participating in democracy.
Thank you again, candidates, for participating tonight, and a big thank you to Alex for volunteering and being brave enough to ask the questions for us tonight. We hope you're inspired to become a lifelong voter. Viewers, please be on the lookout for our nonpartisan voters guide, which should be hitting your mailboxes soon. The voters guide is just one of the many activities that the League does in New Canaan, including voter registration, sponsoring civics education, supporting internships and scholarships, and of course, running this debate. At a time when polarizing views and rhetoric can be the norm, it was wonderful to be here with you tonight, hashing out issues in a civilized and thoughtful manner. Thank you.